Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, new year, a new set of topics. How about point counterpoint, where we get legislators from different parties to, well, as you might expect, agree but maybe disagree on the big issues coming up in the state legislature this year. All of that and more after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're going to have a little internal debate here with my two favorite point counterpointers, and then we're going to have our popular financial literacy update with the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. We'll deal with that in a couple of moments, but first, joining me, as often is the case, is State Representative Michael Sturla from the city of Lancaster, and Senator Jeffrey Piccola, who represents senators get a little more geography, but yes. You got Harrisburg and some other areas in. Are you all in Dauphin County?
No, over in New York County.
You're over in New York County, but you have a little more than Lancaster,
yeah,
so
a little bit more than Lancaster.
So we'll get that in. All right, look, not arguably. 2007 was not the best year for Governor Rendell and his agenda. He had much better from his point of view. Michael, Representative Sturla, I'll start with you. He did, a little tougher year. Some things not done. Let's just sort of go through them. I want to talk about health care. 800,000 people without health care. The governor wants to cover them. He's tried a variety of approaches. Now he's into using a fund that helps doctors pay for their Medigap coverage, for their medical liability coverage. Where do you see health care going when you return in a couple of weeks?
Well, I think we got part of it done. We did some expansion of allied health professionals in terms of their scope of practice. That made it through the House and the Senate. There's more of those bills that are on their way to the Senate, and we hope to get them back, beginning of this year. There was also some things we sent over in terms of hospital-acquired infections, those types of things. So I think a good portion of our for Pennsylvania is actually either done or moving. There is still that big chunk called the insurance portion of it. And I think we're looking at all possible alternatives as to how to fund that. I mean, it really comes down to, do we want to provide insurance for all Pennsylvanians or not? Okay.
Now, the Senate, over in the Senate, where using this MCARE fund, I think, is not as popular as it might be in the House. What's the debate like going on in the Senate? I mean, in terms of the coverage of these 800,000 folks.
Well, I think it's pretty much dead in the water because there is no available funding without raising taxes or grabbing money that belongs to somebody else. You can't take that money from the doctors and apply it to something else. And raising the payroll taxes is just a non-starter.
What about the cigarette tax, which is has been cited? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you can only tax cigarettes so much.
Yeah.
I mean, we've taxed them to literally to death, and I suppose that could be used, but at some point in time, that cigarette tax is going to go out of existence.
Well, I guess the other point about that is that it's whether it's a good tax or a bad tax, you're taxing something that increasingly won't be in the mix as hopefully fewer people smoke. I think we would all agree on that. Go ahead, Mike.
Although it's interesting to hear that the senator says that we're taking money that belongs to the doctors. This is $300 million worth of taxpayer money that had been used to help doctors lower their costs. We've gotten those costs down because of what we did with malpractice reform. We actually have their premiums cut in half. And he still believes that it's their money that somehow, because we dedicated some dollars to it in the past.
I think they're still paying MCARE surcharges, so we should pay that off before we start using that money for other things.
They are paying MCARE surcharges, and that's because of past liability that they had.
So, do you think to bring this to
it wasn't the current doctors. It was doctors in the past. I mean, the whole malpractice situation is screwed up in this state, and that's why we're losing doctors.
All right, but so your argument is you think that the House you'll reach a consensus on what to do, and you'll send it over. I mean, do you think that's?
I think we can reach some consensus. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you got to figure out how to insure these people. Simply saying that we hope that they will get insurance someday doesn't count. Saying that we can provide them with these plans that do $1,000 deductible. Somebody who's making $12,000 a year who gets a $1,000 deductible plan, you might as well not give them any insurance at all. It doesn't mean anything.
What about these ideas about taking some of the programs that now exist, like Adult Basic and some of those, and expanding those as opposed to creating a new problem, a new program? Is that something
I
that
think
the
that's
Senate
more
might find?
realistic. I haven't seen any detail on that.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I'm just saying, I hear that discussed.
And that's when the governor brought forth Cover All Kids. I mean, we had a CHIP program, and all we needed to do was sweeten that a little bit and hopefully deal with that issue. I mean, this is really more about, it's less about health care than it is about Ed Rendell's credentials for a possible Democratic administration.
Okay. All right. Well, let me go.
And there's
you can respond to that. Go ahead.
The
That's
rub.
fair play here.
I really do believe that there are people that are trying to stop this because they're afraid that Ed Rendell might get credit for something. And he said he doesn't really care how we skin this cat. It's about Pennsylvanians getting health care.
We're going to a break, but would you both agree that the better solution, because it's a national problem, would be that it's more the federal government?
Absolutely.
So at least we got some agreement.
And I rest my case.
You're doing it because the federal government hasn't done it, right?
And if we wait for the federal government to do it, as George Bush has shown us with the CHIP program, it's never going to happen.
All right. Michael Sturla gets the last word in this segment. Point, counterpoint continues. Stay with us. New topic after the break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers with Representative Mike Sturla and State Senator Jeff Piccola. We're doing our point-counterpoint. We got them to agree on one thing now. I'm going to work on, look, guys, big issue, mass transit, funding of mass transit, roads and bridges. Independent report, $1.7 billion a year for the next 10 years. We can argue about that, but no one argues that the roads and bridges need to be taken care of. Mass transit, there's a debate on that, but there is certainly some needs there. Senator, let me start with you. You folks passed the law, tolling Route 80, increase the turnpike fees 25%, move it up early, 2009. Federal government says, well, maybe so, maybe not, probably so. Still big controversy on it. Where do you see that going in the new year?
Well, even if the best case scenario plays out, and I don't even consider it best case because I was opposed to that Act 44, it doesn't solve the problem. You mentioned the enormity of the highway and bridge problem in this state, $1.5 billion or more a year that's needed in new money, and this doesn't come anywhere close to raising.
You mean tolling Route 80?
Oh, that doesn't. Where the money's coming from to solve problems, to the extent they're being solved, is from the higher turnpike tolls. What's raised on I-80 has to stay on I-80, theoretically.
Right. But they could... Oh, but couldn't they use it for adjacent roads?
Well, some, but there's limits to how far away from I-80 you can go.
Wait a minute. I'm not sure that a lot of folks understand that. So you agree with that interpretation?
Yeah.
Senator's interpretation. Go ahead.
But I think the real crux of this then has to be if we can't raise more dollars, and I'm not convinced that we should raise more dollars necessarily, then you have to...
You mean more than the 900 million or...
Right. The other way you solve this problem is to reduce your inventory. We have more roads in this state than all of New England, New York, New Jersey, and Maryland combined. You give it back to the locals.
But then don't they have to pay for it?
And you know what? And they will determine whether or not they want those roads.
Gee, no, wait. Do you agree with him on that?
My Republican colleagues always want things pushed down to the most local level.
Doesn't somebody still have to pay for it? Is that another unfunded mandate?
And you know what? If it's right now, in cities, it is pushed down to the local level. Most city streets are owned by the cities, not by the state. You get out into rural Pennsylvania, almost all the roads are owned by the state, and there's no reason for that.
We all agree that the state owns a larger share than in virtually every other state.
That doesn't solve the problem, though. There's you still need the money to fix, maintain, and make the roads safe, and the money isn't there, whether it's at the local level or at state level, because the locals raise the money from the liquid fuels tax, the same tax that you pay at the gas pump. So it's not like local government is avoiding its share. Now, I agree that we should, and every administration since SHAP has tried to move roads back to local, because we have such a high number of state roads because of the old Pincho getting the farmers out of the mud. And we need to get that back, but that's not going to be done in any one fell swoop.
All right, let me go to another question here. Governor is back with this leasing the Pennsylvania Turnpike. I thought when he proposed that it was certainly something a lot of private sector advocates would like. You know, put a private sector operation, do development on it. Could you support that as an option?
As long as there are safeguards that we aren't just giving away the one asset that we have in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, again, I get back to this. There's the one that actually pays for itself. You know, so that's the one we're going to give away. The ones that are costing us money, the roads that get less than 2,000 cars a day, half the state system gets less than 2,000 cars a day. Those are the ones that I want to give away, that I want to have some private sector take over.
And I guess there is a big debate about how the federal government gives its money back based on population and not on amount of road. I presume you would agree. You'd like to see it based on...
We get a little bit more than we send to Washington, but not a great deal more in terms of highway money.
Yeah, but wouldn't you prefer to see it based on the number of miles of roads as opposed to population? Wouldn't we be better off as a state on that
probably would be, although some local roads are eligible for federal highway dollars, too.
So I'm going to ask you the same question about the privatization of the turnpike. A good idea or bad idea?
Well, I think that's an unknown. I've remained open to that possibility because I want to hear the detail. I want to hear, you know, who are the possible buyers, who's going to lease it, what are we going to raise, what does it mean for our future? Because I mean, 30, 50 years down the road, if you'll pardon the expression, where are we? What are we leaving our grandkids?
Yeah. No, I understand. So you have some of the same concerns, but I mean, both of you are open.
I'm open to it.
So, okay. All right, we had to break. We got him at the end of this, you know, sort of this, you know. But you both agree it's a problem in terms of we need the money.
Oh, it's a huge problem, and this governor isn't going to solve it. It's not going to be solved this year. It's not going to be solved during his term, I don't think. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, but if the turnpike fees go up and they toll 80, is that some help?
Well, see, one of the problems is, and I would be willing to be corrected, is if the turnpike fees are going to go up, regardless,
they've accelerated them
25% next year.
But they've accelerated them. Is that
and if we lease it on top of that, are they going to go up some more? I mean, that's a big issue.
Is that one of the safeguards you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, at what point in time do you say we're going to turn? If you're going to turn it over to somebody else so they can raise fees, we could raise the fees.
All right, there's the second big topic. All right, what's next? Well, stay with us. We'll let you know what's coming up in the state legislature in the spring. I guess is probably when you'll get down to serious business. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Financial literacy update coming up. But first, all right, guys, Mike Sturla, I'll start with you. What do you want to see done in the spring? Let me ask you that.
Well, a couple things. One, the gaming revenues have exceeded what we had originally projected, despite people saying they wouldn't even get there. We want to do some capital budget stuff with some of that, as well as get those dollars back out into the hands of taxpayers so we can do projects in districts as well as get a little tax relief. And also, I think we ought to be working a little bit on some of the education stuff. We now have costing out study shows us how much we're not doing in education, and I think we need to sort of get to work on some of that.
All right, Senator, you're chair of the State Government Committee. Go ahead.
Well, first, I'd like to make sure Ed Rendell doesn't raise taxes or fees.
We knew you would say that.
And so that'll be the number one priority. Okay. Number two would be to get some of these reform measures that we've gotten out of State Government Committee, but really haven't gone very far. Failing that, I would like to see a constitutional convention called to consider some of these structural changes in state government. I don't think any of this is going to happen. I think
the governor has said he's for that. good idea, bad idea? You don't know.
I understand his frustration with the Senate not moving things.
There we go. Well, in theory, the Senate is supposed to be a brake on the House. You can blame the Founding Fathers. Great update as always. As I say, you're my favorite point counter. I'm going to get into trouble with your colleagues. You do realize this by saying this. All right, financial literacy update coming up. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program for our monthly financial literacy update. Joining me, as often is the case, is Jim McCormack. He is the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, and Joseph Wambach. He's the executive director of the PA Credit Union Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, let me start with you, Jim. Growing this Go Green, Be Green, a lot more about this. NBC did something. I'll let you get into greater detail about this. It is becoming important, isn't it?
It's very important, and Terry, part of financial literacy, quality of life issues. This year, beginning this year, we're starting a campaign for credit unions to be more environmentally friendly in their operations and with their members. And we have 600 credit unions in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so I think we'll be able to do our part and share information.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Joe, let me ask you this question. I mean, what is it that, you would like or recommend? I mean, I would just think, just not for credit unions, but everybody. I mean, there's examples. I mean, can you cite some examples of what you think ought to be done?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do, Terry, is to facilitate our aims to our credit unions. Right. And what that means basically is a good facilitator, as you know, is somebody who practices what he preaches. You have to know what it is that you're going to facilitate, and you have to continue to do it constantly. Because as you also well know, many of these items, recycling, for example, is something that we take for granted. And yet many people continue not to recycle. And so the reason for facilitation and persistence is to make sure that this eventually is done and continues to be done. And it's one of the reasons that Jim McCormack has set up the task force so we can do this at credit union level. Well,
a couple of things I noticed that you've talked about or that you're recommending people do is, one is, more let's talk specifically, you go through the list, I won't do that.
Yeah, and we're going to come up with a number of industry unique ideas, but Terry, you started alluding to one, for example, if credit union members and bank customers got their statements electronically as opposed to by paper. Think of all the trees we would save. And secondly,
and the mail to open the mail.
And the mail, right. And then secondly, for example, we already have a few credit unions that offer discounts on hybrid vehicles. And a few weeks ago, I think you had the state treasurer on who was talking about loans for energy efficient appliances and possibly picking up on those ideas.
So I guess, Joe, is the idea that you think there may be some merit to knocking off a little bit of interest if somebody, wants to take a loan out and I mean, I guess you can do interest for a whole variety of reasons. I mean, banks and credit unions have different criteria for lending practices anyway, so does it make sense maybe to take off a couple bucks on a loan?
No question of that, Terry. And what makes this unique is, of course, the credit unions are financial institutions. We do financial education in the workplace, and this is an area, frankly, where we can actually be encouraging our members in the workplace to pursue some of the loans, for example, the hybrid loans,
and make a difference,
and
right?
really to make a difference. Yeah. And so, in that's where the Be Green campaign and financial education come together.
And something else you don't normally think about is that people buy, they have to finance appliances. I mean, something we don't normally think about, like whether televisions or refrigerators or washers and dryers. And I guess even there are products there that are more energy efficient, and so. Now, that could get complicated for you. I mean, you're embarking on, I guess your idea is that you just want to set the tone, and then you hope everybody else in the financial industry. Go ahead.
I am by no means an expert in this area. It's going to be a learning process all throughout the whole new year. And by serving as a reference point of information and sharing information, the idea is to be able to be more energy efficient and ecologically friendly and save the credit unions, consumers money.
Yep. But the other thing is that I think you can do is, and you tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong about this, that one of the point is it was something a lot of us don't know much about. I mean, there's tremendous amounts of education involved in. And look, you all can take ideas that work in your area and in other areas, and we can chat about them to figure out what works and what doesn't work, so that people have a better idea. Because this consumer education here is a long way from being anywhere near perfect.
We absolutely can do that, Terry, and that's why Jim McCormack has mandated to me and to Brett Davis, my co-chair of this task force, that we select the best and the brightest in the credit union movement, so that we can try to come up with solutions that are not only communicated to the credit unions, by the way, through our daily magazine, Life is a Highway, but then the credit unions, since they are,
that's an apt description. Go ahead.
So the credit unions can then pass that message along to members, and of course the members are members of the community, and so this is something that could mushroom. But I think
No, go ahead.
And Jim?
No, and Joe, you're going to have, there's a lot of state help and federal help, right? They're going to be using?
Absolutely, and we hope to contact representatives of the DEP, also representatives from some of our credit unions that have relationships with the state workers. We have many teachers' credit unions, and we hope to be able to get some output from them also.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good bit of information. I mean, when I said that, I think there's a lot more information that has now become evident and available to people, but I think the corner is turned on this, and a lot of this is voluntary. I mean, it's not another government regulation. I mean, these are things that, common sense things, as we learn more about it, that people ought to be doing.
I'd like to see my colleagues and other state associations within their industry take a leadership position on this.
All right, great update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.